So on behalf of the American Sephardi Federation Institute of Jewish Experience, we welcome you to join us today. And a little technical issue is your cameras and microphones will be off until the end, at which point we do invite you to please open your cameras. We like to see that there are people at the other end of this. It's a little silly when only 2 people open their cameras, but either way, even those 2 people, we encourage you to open them. So please do open them once the formal presentation is concluded. Today we have an interesting twist on what we're doing. Last time we had an interesting twist because it was a historical fiction. This time we have because we actually have brought in an expert interviewer who wrote one of the forewords of the book that we are presenting today. So not only today do we have our author, who was our main speaker, Rabbi Dr. Sharon Shalom, we also have Professor Stephen Fine, who is going to be speaking with him. And I will hand over the floor to our esteemed partner in many of these things, Professor Ronnie Perellis, and I will let him say welcome as well.
Thank you very much. It's really very exciting today to see this connection, the conversation. I'm really excited to see the conversation unfold between my dear friend, Professor Stephen Fine, and our guest, Rabbi Dr. Sharon Shalom. The story of Ethiopian Jewry is certainly one of the most remarkable chapters in modern Jewish history, among many, many other amazing, surprising, inspiring stories. But it's a unique story, and it's a story that is only starting to be told. And for that reason, it's such a great honor to have Rabbi Dr. Sharon Shalom here, who's just written a very important book, helping to tell that story, this complicated, complex, rich, inspiring Jewish story for a wider world. And I am sure that today's conversation will leave us enlightened and with a lot of questions so that we can continue the conversation. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to just take just a minute to formally introduce each of you. And here we go. Rabbi Dr. Sharon Shalom made Aliyah to Israel on his own in 1982 at the age of 8 under Operation Bat Galim, operated by the Mossad and the IDF commandos. Rabbi Sharon Shalom received his PhD in Jewish philosophy from Bar Ilan University and his rabbinic ordination from Yeshivat Har Etzion in Gush Etzion. Today he serves as rabbi of Congregation Kedoshei Israel in Kiryat Gat. He currently serves as a lecturer at Orot Israel College in Elkanah and at Bar Ilan University. Stephen Fine, historian of Judaism in the Greco-Roman world, is professor of Jewish history at Yeshiva University in New York, director of the Arch of Titus Digital Restoration Project, and of the Yeshiva University Center for Israel Studies, and a founding editor of Images, a journal of Jewish art and visual culture. And without any further ado, I want to turn it over to you. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Thank you so much. And we'll see you at the other end. Please, everyone, send your questions into the chat. We will incorporate it into the question. And at the end, we will open up the screens and we'll all be able to at least see each other and commune this way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronnie. First of all, everyone, I want to tell you how happy I am to be part of this project, part of the working with Drora and Ronnie to make scholarship and ideas widely available in our broad communities wherever we are. And I'm seeing from the list, people are in all sorts of places. I am very fortunate, and that is because about a month and a half ago, I was in Tel Aviv, and I made a date to meet someone whom I had learned to adore, but only on Zoom because of COVID. And so coming together with Sharon Shalom in a restaurant in Tel Aviv was our first human contact, but it wasn't really our first human contact. It was a series of conversations that have been going on now for quite a bit of time that has let us get to know each other and understand each other. One of the things that makes me happy is that we've been able to bring Sharon into our YU family through YU Press that's co-sponsored this wonderful book, right? Dialogues of Love and Fear, co-published by Yeshiva University Press, which you can sort of see there, right? And also into our Center for Israel Studies, which is designed, created to deal with Israel and all of its amazing complexity and wonder. There's nothing more wonderful in recent generations, I think, than the Aliyah Ethiopian Jewry. They're coming to Israel, the amazing steps that have been made toward their acculturation in Israel. You know, it wasn't easy, as Sharon writes in the book. There's an old story that I grew up on that they asked Menachem Begin what it would be like having all of these Ethiopians coming to live in Israel, basic racism, right? What it would be like to have all these Ethiopians coming to live in Israel. And his response was, I think we're going to be 10, meaning we are going to integrate together, we're going to marry together, we are going to have families together, and we are going to be one. Thank God. Sharon is an example of that amazing process. And this book is a statement for the rest of the world of what's good, what's hard, what's happening in that process. So, Rabbi Dr. Sharon Shalom, I'm happy to be here with you today.
My friend, Professor Steve Fine, I am more happy. I don't know if it's more, but I am very, very happy as you to, discussion with you and meeting you. It is by Zoom, but I hope that we can find each other also, maybe in Tel Aviv, in Kiryat Gat, and we can hug, warm hug each other. So, but meanwhile, by Zoom, what's called today, Gam Zoom Letova. Gam Zoom Letova. So,
Zoom Letova.
What?
The key is that we should all mizamzem, we should all buzz, right?
Yeah. So thank you. I'm so happy to a discussion with you. And also thank you to Dr. Drora Arusi, which is the head of the American Sephardi Federation, and she hosts us, and both with Professor Rani also. So all of you, Shalom Aleichem.
This book is a series of conversations. It's not written as a speech. It's not written as an ideological statement explicitly. It's written as a conversation. And what I found most interesting about your conversation is, of course, that it's you on both sides of the conversation taking all of the pieces that you've lived and heard, putting them together and letting the world in to a dialogue. An internal dialogue, a dialogue with the big world, that lets people ask hard questions without asking hard questions. That lets the readers say, oh, I've been thinking about this. Oh, this is how he thinks about it. And that's what's so fascinating, that multifacetedness. But, the book being sort of autobiographical, not completely, starts out, I guess, with my preface, with a little tiny kid getting on a truck. And I'm wondering if you could first tell us about that little kid and how he came to Israel.
How I came to Israel? Okay. How I am come to Israel. So shortly, Steve, I all the time I used to say that when I grow up as a Jewish consciousness, and when we see in our village a bird was called store, and we used to count to the store, to the, in Amharic say, Are, Shimela, Shimela, Agerachin Jerusalem dena, Shimela, Shimela, Agerachin Jerusalem dena. It means, Shimela, store, please. send our message, warm message to Jerusalem. Please, we want to deliver our, and I grew up like this. And, my grandma and my grandfather, mom, they open the Bible and say, God promised us that one day we'll be in Jerusalem. So I grew up with this story, with Jewish consciousness. So when someone, my wife and me, we went to the one office and we have to write at the paper when he came from, each one. I wrote that I was born in Ethiopia. And my wife, she wrote she was born in Switzerland. And the guy there, he was in shock. And he asked my wife, are you crazy? You was born in Switzerland? Yes. And you immigrant from Switzerland to Israel? Yes. Why? Why? You are crazy. You have to stay there. It's like paradise there. At the end, he saw at me and he said, I can't understand why you moved from Ethiopia to Israel. Okay, no, because Africa, and I think this is a big preconception that if I am from Ethiopia, no one can let me to say that a little people, they know the story of Ethiopian Jewish. So I come to hear, not, my community and Ethiopian Jews, they moved from Ethiopia to Israel, not because there was a bad life, because there is no food, there is African. No, because we were a Zionism people. And we read like other Jews in the world and say, and we pray that one day we'll be in Yerushalayim. So this was my consciousness in Ethiopia. And we walk, by the foot in the desert of Sudan. And from Sudan, we arrive finally to Eretz Israel. Steve, I told you that my journey, I don't know if I don't remember if I told you, I didn't remember, but my journey among Israeli society is more difficult, more than my journey from Ethiopia to Israel.
Of course.
Because
and in Ethiopia, yes. What did they call you? What was
in
your
Ethiopia?
Name? Yeah.
The Christian.
No, what was your family name? Your personal name in Ethiopia?
In Ethiopia, my Ethiopian name is Zode. Zode, yes, Zode.
So when Zode showed up in Israel, what happened to him next? What happened to his name?
Listen, when I arrived to Israel with the Zode name, at the airport, Ben Gurion airport, someone, I don't remember, she decided to change my name from Zode to Sharon. But no one told me that someone changed my name. When I arrived to Afula city, someone, he began to call me by new name, Sharon. But I never understand what does mean Sharon. And I asked her, what's this Sharon? And she told me, no, she explained to me slowly, which I already got a new name, Sharon instead of Zode. And Steve, I want to tell you, I was very happy, actually. I was very happy. You know why? Because I got a new name from Jerusalem. This must be very holy name. Wow, I was very, very happy. But in the continuation, I want to tell you, Steve, that this was, I think, is bring me to creation, to situation that there is two identity. Okay, this Zode is one word, and Sharon is the other words. It's very, very different. If you want, I can explain to you what's mean to be Sharon and Zode.
Please.
Okay. Okay. So at the beginning, I was very happy, have Steve, someone told me that someone, he was a story as Ethiopian Jews, if they want to explain to you something, first of all, they tell you story. First of all, like the Bible, okay? I want to tell you a story that someone, he dreamed a dream, and his dream, he arrived to the next world, to the heaven, and he decided to go to the paradise, Gan Eden, and he saw great tzaddikim, rightness, sit around the table and they learn Torah. Say, no, I looking something else, something action, and he decided to go to the Gehenom, hell, and there he met music and everything was very, very nice, and he woke up and couple years later, he passed away, and now he arrived reality to the heaven. And they told him, you can't change, you can choose, please. One option is to go to the paradise, Gan Eden. The other option is go to the hell, to the Gehenom. And he remembered what he saw at the beginning, at the dream, his dream, and he decided to go to the Gehenom. And when he decided his decision and going to the Gehenom, suddenly he got all the punishment that exists in the Gehenom, and he was in shock. And he asked, what's going on here? What changed? And they told him at the beginning, you were a tourist, and now you are Ole Chadash, and you are a new immigrant. So slowly, this dream and paradise slowly changed. Like, I'm not exaggerate if I say Gehenom, but I was really in very, very complicated situation between Zode, which exists in my parents, the tradition of my community, and between the yeshiva at Har Etzion, and my rabbi, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, Rabbi Lichtenstein. It is a great privilege for me to be in this yeshiva. And my Rabbi Amital, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And there is, I was a turn between the two words, turn, karua, turn between.
Torn.
Yeah, turn, yes, okay?
Torn, yes.
Yeah, it was very hard because Zode is from my home and Sharon is from the yeshiva. And my thought was there to be, I want to be Israeli. I want to be Israeli. And to be Israeli is, when I study in boarding schools, but I never distinguish between Sephardi and Ashkenazi. Because from my perspective, Zoda's perspective, all the non-Ethiopian, they are white. And I don't distinguish between Sephardi and between Ashkenazi. Yeah, they're white people. And so I learned all the melody of Sephardi, piyutim, all the piyutim. אוכל יום מיום אשתהן איתה מדי צופיה, יוצר מידו שרבר, and I was so proud to be Israeli. And when I arrived to Har Etzion, and my friend told me, no, you are still not Israeli. You are maybe Moroccan, but you are not Israeli. Say, what's going on? It's in Hebrew. Now I understand that if I want to be Israeli, I have to, to be Ashkenazi. So I went to the Mea Shearim participant in what's called in Yiddish, in Tish, with the Hasidim, with the Rebbe, and I ate kigel, herring, and and I was very proud. Wow! So I grew up, but one thing was, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, that all this Sharon against Zode. At this time, I was Sharon against Zode. I don't like Zode. I want to be Sharon. And I, come back from the yeshiva, and I told my mom, she passed away, and I make Chazara B'tshuva, Chatati, Pashati, Aviti. And I want to tell you that during 2 years, I told to my mom that I don't eat in your home, because your house, your kitchen is not kosher. My mom, she brought me to here. My grandma, grandfather, our spiritual leaders, they brought here, and they survive as a Jew in Ethiopia according to the tradition. And I come from the Sharon perspective, and I told to the Zode, you are not kosher. And
right.
This was very, very hard for me. So in some way, this book is conversation between Zode and Sharon.
I knew that reading it before I ever met you. I knew that. It's set out as the rabbi's daughter, who's clearly a Dati Leumi, a religious Zionist, well-educated, the kind that you would meet at Yeshivat Har Etzion, right? Or at Migdal Oz, which is the women's school. And on the other side, the Israelicized Ethiopian who knew he was Ethiopian, the son of the Kes. And I was watching your internal conversation on a huge range of subjects. So, but what I also found was that almost at the end of almost every chapter, there was that Hegelian resolution that you also find in your halacha book, where the two names are coming together, and you can feel they're coming together into that single personality that I met. And the book is a projection of that process. And that's sort of what I wrote in my preface. And that's what I feel as you just described it. The book deals with subjects like, love, luck versus labor. Let me look at some of the other titles. Holiness, gift versus task. There's a lot of personal responsibility, racism versus stigma. Everything is set up in that either or, which the goal of the book is to let people hear the resolution process of that either or. Am I correct?
Steve, you are 100% correct. 100%. So thank you. Thank you very much. Now I speak with you I participant in a conference was called Immigration, Religion and Immigration, now here in Bar Ilan University. And they went to a restaurant, and I stay with you here because I want to be here with you instead to eat something. And this is a...
Wait, stop. Next time I'm there, I'll make it up to you.
מצוין.
Keep going.
Someone told me, Steve, that have three boys. One is Israeli, and the second is American, and the third is Ethiopian. And they sit together in restaurant. And after 45 minutes later come to them, say, sorry, we don't have any food. And the Israeli stand very angry and say, what's a sorry? What's a sorry? And the American stand and ask, what's this? We don't have. Oh my goodness, what's we don't have? And the Ethiopian stand in shock and say, what is food? What's food? Anyway, people say, no, of course, what's food? And anyway, Steve, you correct 100%. Because as I mentioned here, we spoke today with the student, professor from state, in this conference, religious and immigration. I want to tell you, I told them that in America is racism community, racism society, in America, yes? But in Israel, the issue is another issue. It's the issue here in Israel is who is a Jew. It's not the root of the problem is not racism. And someone, he is African American, he's a professor. He say, I'm in shock. When I arrived here, he told me this morning, here in Israel, they thought they saw at me. And they can understand that I am a professor. They thought that I am a taxi driver. So how you can say that here is something else? In Israel is also, there is, like America, there is racism against Black people. Listen, I told him, I disagree with you. And he's a professor, she's an Ashkenazi. She also told him and say, wow, he was in shock. How Ashkenazi can disagree with this guy because he's a Black? Wow, because I feel that in Israel there is racism. And you going to tell me that is not racism? You can't agree with my feeling? Wow, what's going on here? If you can sit around one table and we can discussion, why I have to feel afraid, like I go on the eggs, if I tell something, wow, against Black people, they going to, take me like Haman and put him in the tree, okay? Why? We have to, and this is a problem in the state of in America. Like what in communism people, that if someone against communist, Stalin and all what in communism people, they kill you immediately. Also, what going on in Hamas in Gaza here. So I think you have to feel at home and you have to tell what you feel. And this is, I try to tell here, the conversation. And because at the beginning, I was very, angry. If someone telling me, you Ethiopian, you maybe Black, something that, I was very angry. But I think the solution is dialogue. So the concept, the ideal of this book is I bring all the issue and I put them on the table. The instructor is dialogue, because I think dialogue today we need dialogue. We need dialogue. We need dialogue. Steve, I want to tell you, some community in state. I want to tell which specific community in the state, but it was in Florida. I wrote in my paper, if fear, Trump love. If fear, Trump love. And the community there, they fight each other because I wrote Trump, the president. And if Trump is not Trump, and people are, it was like crazy. There is no conversation. There is dialogue. There is no dialogue. So I think slowly, we lost this secret, the dialogue. And Steve, maybe one thing I want to tell you, when Jacob fight with the angel, they fight, but they speaking only when the angel he stops the dialogue. At this time, Jacob win the angel, because angel, he stopped the conversation and dialogue with Jacob, and he hit him, and at this time, Jacob win the angel.
Yes. One of the dialogue points in the book that I found strongest was one that you didn't write. And that was a boy named Eurus who wrote you a letter. At the very end of the book, you received a letter from a young boy.
Yes. Wow,
Eurus, an Ethiopian boy.
Yeah.
Who read the Hebrew version.
She? Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I couldn't tell, right? Who read the Hebrew version and was struggling with standing tall in Israel and was doing the natural things when you're dealing with civil rights. She was reading Malcolm X. She was reading Martin Luther King. She was struggling to figure out her place within Israeli society. Then she read your book. And she came back to you and she said, I would want leaders like you to speak out more and to express a voice of hope and love of the land. I would want them to speak more about the traditions of Ethiopian Jewry. It was so powerful to me to see that, all right, the book, especially in English, isn't for Ethiopians, generally speaking, except there are some in America as well. The book in English is so that the English-speaking, mostly Jewish world can listen in and understand what Eurus is feeling and understand the necessity to build each community according to its traditions, to build each community together as Klal Yisrael, and to give the kids who feel that they don't have a voice, which is what you're giving her, a voice. Have you ever met Eurus? Or is it the letter?
If I met my
Have you met this girl?
She spoke with me by phone. But I once, in case, I met her in Yerushalayim, in Hebrew University, Yeros. But a lot of, my rabbi, Rabbi Amital, when I come to him to hear, when I come to the yeshiva, I ask him, Rabbi, why you tell us that one of the condition to accept as a yeshiva bucher in the yeshiva was if someone convert himself to go to the mikveh, okay? And I asked my rabbi, why this? Because I am 100% a Jew. And he told me, listen, in Hebrew say, תקשיב, בחור, תקשיב. Please, אם יבוא פה מישהו מאלון שבות ויגיד שאני רוצה להתחתן עם הבחור הזה, if someone come, parents say, I want to marry with my daughter my daughter going to marry with him, how I can answer to him? I told him, you are little Jewish, you have argue in rabbinate. In this word, in this sentence, Rabbi told me, you have to be, smart instead of to be right. So Eros, of course, she feels that she feels that I represent their problem, their situation. And a lot of Ethiopian Jews, second generation especially, feel very close for this book. Say, wow, this is a solution. This is a reality. No discrimination, no problem and racism. I give them a way, a solution, a complement way to think this and this, and responsibility. No blame all the time. And Eros, she asked me, really, listen, I take responsibility to myself. I do everything, but the Israeli society still recognize me as Ethiopian. And so, and the policeman arrest me because I'm Ethiopian. So please tell me. And she right sometimes. She right, but we have to be very smart. If there is any problem, a low problem, instead in Israel, there is no racism in institute racism. Maybe people, personality, yes, of course. But I believe that in institution, in Medinat Israel, there is no racism. So yes, go ahead.
I'm not worried about racism. She was, but that's not really where her problem was. Her problem was in taking this new place and taking her old place and putting herself as a whole person in Israeli culture, right? Putting your two names together for you, putting her whole identity together in one person for her. I think that's what she's looking for, even more than the racism, the externals. I think what she sees in the book is the capacity, and you just said this, I think, to be internal, to live within her Ethiopianness, to live within her Israeliness. And what she wants most of all in this article, as far as I can tell, is to smile. And that's what your various conversations give her, I think. Sharon, which chapter do you like best of all of them?
Wow. First of all, Steve, I really appreciate what you say now about the Eros. Yes, you are a professor. You are how it's called a psychologue, psychology. Wow, I'm so excited because really this is exactly what Eros, she wants to smile, as to feel at home, more confident. This is really what she wants. Thank you. I'm so excited what you say now.
But I think that's what your book is saying. You are looking for your own smile in Israeli culture and telling people how you did it, but by doing it as a synthesis and antithesis, but neither of them is really purely the thesis or purely the antithesis. You're offering ways to come to synthesis.
Yes.
Is my take.
Yeah. By the way, Steve, I'm so excited when you wrote the introduce. How do you say? No,
the preface.
Or the book, and you wrote. When I wrote this, I was really appreciate, and you as you recognize the root of the problem from the perspective of Euros now, and you're telling me. And so I was very excited about the Euros. And also when you wrote what you wrote at the beginning of this book, I say, wow, this professor is amazing professor. I want to be his friend. Wow. Because before that, we never met. Say, wow, this professor, wow, he's very clever and very deeply. So I just want to tell to the people now, if you can, share your experience when you wrote this introduce.
This was a hard book to provide an entree to, which was my job, especially since mine follows after Rabbi Sachs. So I was coming as a bridge between Rabbi Sachs and the actual book, and I knew it. And so what I needed to do was start in my world, of the world of the rabbis, who have a wonderful line in Breshit Rabbah, Kol Tchilot Kashot, all beginnings are difficult, and expand from that. I guess it's in the Mechilta as well, that's where I took it from, and expand from that to the larger question of the Ethiopian community through the micro, which is the one person, right? And what struck me, which I guess is how I started this conversation, was how you went from Zueda to Sharon, to Rabbi Sharon, to Rabbi Dr. Sharon, right? And soon to be Rabbi Professor Sharon, right? And how, and more to the point, the dad to what? How many children?
5.
5 children.
If I remember.
And a wife who came from Switzerland, and a synagogue where you serve Holocaust survivors as a bridge back for everyone to think about how to live together. It's a horrible responsibility because everyone's watching. And I'm so appreciative that weight, you're willing to take it, and so cautious to put it on you. You hear what I'm saying? In other words, it's no human being can live up to everyone's expectations. That's the nature of being human beings. But your book is your attempt to take all of this complexity, right? Put it together and say, this is who I am. Maybe somebody else could gain from it. It's not everybody's book that comes out in Hebrew that finds its way into English translation. And I'm sure it's going to be widely read and reviewed and thought about in places you wouldn't expect. For example, you would expect this for synagogue study groups, but I'll bet it finds its way into churches across North America and maybe even into Islamic communities, into people of identity who are trying to figure out their various pieces. This falls into a long line of literature, some of which you quote, right? After all, there's no one more complexly uncomfortable with his many identities than Rabbi Soloveitchik, whom you quote many times, right? But who became a guidepost for very different kinds of people as they move through life. Or Rav Lichtenstein, right? Or Rav Amital, who you've mentioned, and most of all, perhaps your parents and all the members of the community, all of whom are doing what you're doing. But the people from Ashkenaz don't know what the people from Ethiopia are feeling. And the people from Ethiopia don't really know what the people of Ashkenaz are saying. And they're talking to each other. And there's this conversation that's hidden one from the next, no matter what their intentions. And that you had the guts to come out and begin to say, this is what these people are thinking, kinda, and this is what these people are thinking, kinda, and let's have a talk, is a big deal. and that's what I hope the people who are joining us will hear, the very human conversation. In an earlier version of the article that didn't make it in, I said, you know, this is the book for those kids that you have, all 5 of them, sitting on your knee. And then I found out some of them are grown up, but still figuratively sitting on your knee. And learning how to navigate their identities in the current contemporary, wonderful, complex state of Israel. I think, Drora, if I'm not right, it's time for us to start talking to everybody else. Is that right?
It is.
Ronnie, you're
That's
in charge.
why I opened
Yeah.
my camera.
Cool.
Thank you
And-
both so much.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Just Drora, just I want to hello? Drora, yeah, Steve, thank you. Because that I love you. Because that you're deeply thought. You know, you can expand the self-perception, the boundaries of self-perception. And this, you know, to say Ethiopian Jews is me. Ethiopian Jews, you know, Sharon Shalom is also Steve. Steve is Sharon Shalom. And, you know, your perspective is amazing. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's human.
Been wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm now inviting you, please, to open your cameras. We do appreciate that. Don't open your microphones yet, please. But I do want, before we take any questions, there are a few questions in the chat, but I do want to note that Sharon and I have been working on a course, and some of the questions that are there are being answered in there, and I do want to make sure to say it. So I'll give you the 1.5 minute promo here, if you allow me. Give me one moment. And in the meantime, please do accept to be promoted to panelist. Even it doesn't mean that you have to present or anything. It just means that you have to. Okay. So here we go.
Hello, I'm Shalom, and I'm going to talk about out of Africa.
The Prime Minister of Israel at that time gave an order to the Mossad, bring me the Ethiopian Jews.
לפני 80 שנה, בזמן מלחמת העולם השנייה, התחיל להגידו קס, כמו קיסר כזה.
Yom Kippur, everybody is in the synagogue, the religious leaders don't stop their prayings.
Some were hidden in the monasteries, lost synagogues of Ethiopian Jews. There might be a possibility of finding some Hebrew text.
So I thought I'd share that, since part of it does talk about, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Part of that does talk about some of the things that are being raised today, which is some of the racism and some of the prejudice and some of the crises of identity versus identification. So let's start with, I was asked, so Ronnie or Stephen, you want to take it, and I will invite everyone to open.
Drora. Okay, yeah.
Definitely
Drora.
English.
Yeah.
I want to just, I want to say, I left this conversation and I'm excited for the questions because I'm sure we're going to go deeper, but I'm inspired. I'm thinking many big ideas, and it was really a conversation of heart and mind. I want to thank, before we open to the questions, I want to thank Drora for putting this together. And the reason why the Schneider program is so excited to work with the Institute of Jewish Experience on projects like this is because we both see and appreciate that the world is big, that the world is complex, and that people's stories are important, and appreciating their specificity is essential, and respecting that. And this was one of the great examples of that ability that within an hour we're able to go very deep into a very, very complex and fascinating story. Let's turn to some of the questions then. Let's see what we have.
While you're looking at it, Stephen just showed the book. Professor Klein just showed the book. It is available, and you'll be getting the link in the follow-up email. So please do read follow-up emails. There's a reason I send them.
Or you'll find it on your local bookseller, because it's everywhere, I'm happy to say.
I'm sure there's a question here, Rabbi Sharon. They want to know about, how do you see Ethiopians in contemporary Israeli society? Are they integrating? Are they developing their own cultural institutions? How do you see that?
Okay, thank you, Professor, and thank you for the question. This kind of questions, this book I wrote in this book. Okay, if you want to expand your knowledge, I suggest to read this book. Okay, I try to say that the conversation slowly around the world change to be dichotomy, black and white, and there is no passion. People scream, and they want to kill others. And I created another world. I want to tell you, I married 22 years. And between my wife and me, there is a big gap. The culture is very different, Switzerland culture, Ethiopian culture. But we understand that we are a couple and we love each other. So if the love trump fear, so we can discussion and sit in, and we can found a solution in any tension and fight each other. Fight. So regarding the question, look at me, for example. Okay, I come to Israel, and I didn't know how to use the bathroom. Okay, sorry. I was in Ethiopia, not in the city. I was in the village, and when I arrived, someone explained to me how to use the bathroom, but he don't explain to me that I have to sit on the toilet. And I went, and they stand on the toilet with my foot.
Yeah.
And later I learned in the Ulpan that this room call him restroom. And I asked myself, I work very hard. Why people call this room restroom? And a couple years later, I went to the bathroom, and I forgot to knock at the door, and I opened it, and the guy already used the bathroom, he forgot to lock the bathroom. When I opened it, what's called in English for me was discovery, because I saw him sit in the toilet and he hold newspaper and say, finally, now I know why people call to this room restroom. And from this time, I found myself, I'm professor in the state of Israel. I'm a rabbi, which was established by Holocaust survivor, and Mary Kneine, in Yiddish say Kneine Hore, Professor Steve. And Baruch Hashem, I hear. So this is racism or not racism?
No.
Okay. So I think in other way, Ethiopian Jews, they are 2% among Israeli society, but unfortunately in the prison, they are between 20 and 30 percent. So 2% in population in Israel, but in the prison it's very, very higher. So the question is more complicated. It's more complicated. And one Ethiopian, he told me that he, as Ethiopian, he have to prove to the others which he is a very, very clever. But Ashkenazi, he have to prove to others which he is very stupid. Is to say that there is a preconception that if you are Ethiopian, so you have to be very stupid, no smart, came from Africa, you are not Zionism. So there is a lot of preconception, okay? So as this book, I distinguish between stereotype and between racism. And, racism say, I don't want to take responsibility. I am okay, and I blame everything about my life. I'm very, and I think I distinguish between stereotype and between racism to say that each one have to take responsibility. Each side say, the problem in Ethiopian Jewish community, this is my problem 100%. As a policeman, this is my 100%. As a government, it's my 100%. Why Israel, Ethiopian immigration, they are 2%, and the prison, they are 13%. Why? This is my responsibility. But in the other hand, when I recognize this situation as stereotype instead of racism, I tell to the Ethiopian side, yes, you also have a responsibility to change the situation. You have to take why. You have to work very hard and take responsibility to your life. So the problem is more complicated. So because we say a lot of Ethiopian immigrants, they successful, they lawyer and lectures and officer in the army, they amazing. But in the other side, we saw a very, very bad situation with the Ethiopian Jewish community. So this is more complicated.
Thank you. We have a question from Sandra.
Yes. Rabbi Shalom, it's so beautiful to see you again. If you remember, you were our panelist for 10 Paths to God at the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of Montreal for, the Rabbi Sachs. It was about faith, and you were my co-panelist. And it's a program that I did. Why did I choose to be with you is because, so many people are bashing Israel and even Jews saying, it doesn't have a right to exist, or they shouldn't be here, or they shouldn't be there. But I think the existence itself of Ethiopian Jews is the biggest explanation to the world. This is why Israel exists. Look where these people were. Look how they were persecuted all these years, centuries. And look how they cried when they arrived in Israel, because someone told them the temple doesn't exist anymore. And so I think it's so important, the work that you do, and please go on, don't stop, which you will not. I also wanted to say, forgot, but it's so overwhelming to see you And thank you for being who you are. Oh, and this is what you said during our discussion on the panel. What I took away, you know, the most beautiful thing I've heard, you said, we are not defined by society. Society does not define us. It's we, which you were just saying now. It's we who make a difference, who take responsibility. And I think the responsibility is even heavier on the shoulder of the Ethiopian Jews, because nobody's going to listen to anyone unless they listen to their inner voice. And you were talking about going in the inner. So thank you for being who you are. I'm going to take your book to our synagogue.
That'd be great. You should bring them out. Bring them out to Montreal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sandra, just I want to tell you, when I arrived to Boston, someone called me, Rabbi Sharon, you are Israeli, Ethiopian Israeli. And I told him, excuse me? Yes, you are Ethiopian Israeli. And I told him, I am Israeli. And he told me, no, because in America, there is also African American. So like African American, you are Ethiopian Israeli. And I told him, I disagree with you. And someone is African American, and I agree with this sentence. I asked him, why you have to agree with this African American? I told him, where are you from? And told him, I American, I was born in America. What about your parents? And he told me, oh, my parents are Jewish, and they also born here. And what about grand? They came from Hungary. Hungary. So nice to meet you, Hungarian American. Nice to meet you, Hungarian American. So why people, so all the American people, they immigrant from all the world. So like, not like exactly like African American, but all of them, they immigrant. So why still people use with African American, so this is to take responsibility, and we have to change the conversation, to change the language. We have to change the language. It's very, very important. No language in the paper, the language in the reality. It's very, very important. And I pay a high price when I tell that Ethiopian Jews, they can continue with their tradition in Israel. And they told me, as your Orthodox rabbi, how you allow them to go with Ethiopian unique tradition, which is not same way with the Orthodox way. And I want to tell you that I pay a high price to tell this, and I believe that in one hand, we have to keep.
I want to make sure we get to more questions.
Yeah. I stop. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to point out one thing. We were asked what nusach that you would have if you went to your synagogue in Kiryat Gat, but we know, like, there are Holocaust survivors, it's Ashkenazi. So that's
this is Ayuf Nusach.
Yeah. And
who asked that? Who asked that?
Don't worry, we're going through questions. If anybody has more questions, you'll send us the email, we'll continue it. I want to make sure that we get to the rest of them. Some of the things that Sharon mentioned here are elaborated on in the course, like he was talking about the plaque that he got when he came out with his first book. So there's a lot there as well.
Drora?
Yeah. I'm going to let Nicole ask a question. I'm not talking.
Yeah, just one. Have more questions? We finish.
Yeah, Nicole and Carolyn, and then we're stopping.
Yeah, okay.
Short answer.
Yeah, you started to touch on something I'm interested in. You spoke a lot about difference in race and difference in culture. But there's more to it in terms of the difference that I see that you haven't hit upon as much yet. And I'm interested in that, possibly because of my own background. I didn't follow the Jewish trajectory of what people say Jews have been who are immigrants. I'm a third generation American from Central Europe, and I didn't grow up in an educated and economically sound household, and nobody in my neighborhood did either. I mean, these were poor areas in the Bronx that nobody seems to talk about. So there's a difference in economic status, there's a difference in education. I'm still secretly feel that there's a gap with me and the rest of the world that I'm involved in because of those two additional things. Can you talk more about the economic gap that has been affecting Ethiopian Jews and the education gap that might be affecting Ethiopian Jews?
Wow, that's good questions. Thank you for your question. Listen, I want to tell you, in one hand, thank you. Of course, there is a big gap with economy and education. There is a big gap. You know, the gap is something objectively. Okay, because you know most of the Ethiopian Jews came from the village. Okay, and most of them never write and they never open book. For example, I was a shepherd, okay, in Ethiopia. So objectively, there is a big gap. Economic, because we left everything in Ethiopia and we come with nothing here. We come with culture, with Judaism, but with a lot of money. So as the beginning it's from, it's very gap. I saw how my parents-in-law, they support us, okay? When we marry, they support us with the money. When I grow up, I help to my parents, okay? I work a little and I give them money. So, of course, the problem is economic. There is very big gap in economic issue. The problem is with the education. And there is also problem, I want to tell you, that if a school in Kiryat Gat, or school in Sderot, or school in Be'er Sheva, and we take school from Tel Aviv, or school from Herzliya, and both of them, the student, grow up and they finish school, basic school and high school, and we take them together. They grow up and they how do you say, they grow up, they finish same, how do you say, graduate, some of them, and we still see a big gap between the school in Be'er Sheva and between the school in Tel Aviv.
And that's a whole huge other conversation, so I don't want to go into that, but we will, because we'll have to have you back. But I want to make sure we have one more question. Nicole's had her hand up for a while, and then please do send the questions to me. I will forward them, and I will help continue the conversation. Nicole, sorry.
Okay. First of all, I just want to tell a little story about the toilets. I worked in Afghanistan in a hospital that was built by the French, so they had French toilets. Well, over there, it's really Turkish toilets. And actually, in the hospitals, they have both, the European toilets and then the Turkish toilets. But in that hospital where I worked, they had only the French toilets. Well, and indeed what happened, it's exactly what you described. I mean, the people saw the toilet, they will go and put their feet on. It's very hard to do that. And no one explained to them that, and in fact, the thing is the hospital should have had, Turkish toilets. And they should have had both, but they insisted on having just that kind, and that that created this problem. So this is like a little bit worldwide for the toilet. And then about another little thing is I have some black friends, American black friends, who came to Israel to visit, and one is a young guy and is very gorgeous and so forth. And first they thought he was Ethiopian, right? But as soon, and we're talking about the white people in Israel, as soon as they knew it was American, Black American, all the girls were there. But that tells you also that all the nuances of the thing. In other words, well, you are in Israel and you see Ethiopian, but you see a Black American, wow, suddenly it's God. And this is like, it's just, I mean, it told me that story, and I was just, when I have to say there is definitely among people. I remember going to Netanya, and there was a social worker, and there were kids, and there were a few different. There were some Ethiopian kids and other kids, and I felt very uncomfortable. Social worker was white. And there was some of the Ethiopian kids, and she was like so mean to, it seemed to me, to one girl that was Ethiopian, and that girl obviously was like very, trying to close herself up, and it was very, very hard to see that. So I think that this is definitely racism in Israel. And then the other thing is, I think when we're talking about the word integration, we're talking about one-way thing. It's a one-way concept, and it really should be a two-way concept. In other words, it should be all the different groups that are integrating with each other. It's not one group coming and integrating with the other one. And that is the thing that's not really thought of. It's like always when we say integration is to what there is, but not in a both way situation. And I think that there is something to that. So I wasn't really, oh yeah, the thing about that you were saying about the gel and I think that it's a very complex situation. It's not just a situation because people are poor or this or that, or are not well integrated or things like that. But it's also that when you have an adolescent, Ethiopian adolescent, well, by definition, it will have done something wrong for the policeman, just like it happens in the state. And so obviously something will, it hasn't done anything wrong, but it will be caught for nothing. And then you have like a snowball situation. And I think that's part of what's happening also. And I want to say another thing that I was privy to, which was one time my nephews were living in Netanya. So they are quote unquote white. And they were doing some whatever you call it in school. And I remember there were two of them, my nephew and another guy, and they were like, I don't know, 10 or something, 11. Well, whatever they did, I think they broke a glass with the chairs or something like that. Well, they accused an Ethiopian kid of that. Now, of course, this happens all the time, this story, this happened, it can happen also with non-Ethiopian, but I'm just saying that there's also the easy way there, because somehow they must have thought that it would be, the teacher will say, okay, yes, it's more like it, something like that. So anyway.
Thank you, Awana.
Thank you. This is really stimulating, and clearly we have other areas to explore here, and the course looks very exciting. I encourage everyone to look into that and to send your questions. Fortunately, we really have run over time.
Professor Ronnie, I agree with you. The course is amazing. So I suggest, and I want to thank to Dr. Drora about her passion and her work is because it's a very, very good work. So I suggest it's very